Assalamu alaikum. I'm Amina Haider, lecturer, Institute of Business Studies. I'm here with the screencast of Introduction to Business course. This is lecture number 13, and the topic that we are going to discuss today is characteristics of joint stock company. Let's move towards our topics. These are the topics that we are going to cover today. We would discuss what a joint stock company is, and then we would discuss its feature or characteristics. And in the end, we are going to summarize our topics. Let's move towards our first topic. The definition of a joint stock company. Joint stock company is a voluntary association of persons for profit having the capital divided into some transferable shares, and the ownership of such shares is the condition of membership of the company. So, a joint stock company is actually an association of person who contribute money, which is which is called capital, and they work for some common purpose. It's a voluntary association because it depends upon the willingness of the person. As long as a person want to be part of it, they would, and when they want to quit, they would transfer their shares to somebody else. So it entirely depends upon the willingness of the person. So the next portion of the definition depicts that the capital is divided into some transferable shares. So the proportion of capital to which each member is entitled is his share, and every member holding such share is called a shareholder, and the capital of the company is known as the share capital. So, a company is called an incorporated association. The reason behind it is it comes into existence only after registration. Whereas when we talk about the other two forms of business, that is the sole proprietorship and partnership, registration is not compulsory for these kinds of for these forms of business. So now we move towards the characteristics of a joint stock company. So the very first characteristic is that it is an association of persons. So the simple way to describe a joint stock company is that it is a business organization that is owned jointly by all its shareholders. All the shareholders own a certain amount of stock in the company, which is represented by their shares. So, when you think of all the largest company in the world, these are actually not proprietorship or partnership. These companies are all joint stock companies. So, when dealing with businesses on a fairly larger scale, a joint stock company is the most suitable form of business organization. So, such form of association can be divided into two types. One is the private company and the other is public companies. In private companies, there are only two minimum members needed for it, and there is an upper limit which is that of 50 members. Whereas in case of public companies, as the name depicts public, so it contains a minimum of 7 members and there is no upper limit. So as many people can be part of it as many want to be. So in case of public company, there is no restriction over its maximum number. Second is artificial person. It is created by legal process and not by natural birth. So a company is a legal entity. Like we said, you have to go through certain legal process for its registration. That's why we call it a legal entity. So a company which is a legal entity, it has been created by the statutes of law. uh, like a natural person, it can do certain things like it can own a property in its own name, it can enter into a contract, a company can borrow money and it can lend money, a company can sue or it can be sued, etc. So, a company has been granted certain rights by the law which it enjoys through its board of directors. So, the company, being an artificial person, has many of its own rights. A joint stock company in Pakistan is incorporated and regulated under the Company Ordinance 1984. So, like we said, that by artificial person, we actually mean that the company does not has a natural personality, but it has a legal personality. Next is that it is an independent, it's a separate legal entity. A company has a legal entity quite distinct from its members. The company is created under law. It has a separate legal entity apart from its members. A company acts independently of its members. So the company is not bound by the act of its members, and members do not act as agent of the company. A person can own its shares and can be its creditor too. So the life of the company is independent of the lives of the members. The company, like we said, the company can sue at sued in its own name. So a company has a separate legal entity. The next characteristic of a joint stock company is that of a limited liability. Shareholders of a joint stock company are not liable to the extent of shares they hold in a company, not more than that. So one of the key attribute of a joint stock company where the company offers protection to its investor is through limited liability. The liability of a shareholder is limited to the value of shares they have purchased. In case if a company incurs huge liabilities, the shareholders can only be responsible, or they can be only be called upon to pay the unpaid balance of the shares. The company, being a separate legal entity, can incur debts in its own name, and thus the shareholders will not be personally liable for that. However, if shareholders of a limited company have unlimited liability, so the liability of members of a company limited by guarantee is limited to the guaranteed amount. In simple words, this is the major difference between a company and the other two forms of business, that is sole proprietorship and partnership. The liability of shareholders of a company is limited. The personal asset of any member cannot be liquidated to repay the debts of a company. A shareholder liability is limited to the amount of unpaid share capital. The amount of debt has no bearing on this. Only the company asset can be sold off to repay its own debts. The member cannot be made to pay up. The next characteristic is that of a common seal. Being an artificial person, a joint stock company cannot sign any document. Thus, this common seal is the company representative while dealing with the outsiders. So, the company, being an artificial person, like we said, an artificial person is not like a natural person, but it has been given certain privileges of a natural person, so it cannot put its signatures. The law requires every company to have a seal and get its name engraved on it. The seal of the company is fixed on all important documents and contract as a token of signature. That seal is actually used as a token of signature. So the board of directors must witness the affixation of that common seal. So when a company is performing its day-to-day functions, and day-to-day functions are usually conducted by the board of directors. So when a company enters into any contractual agreement or it signs an agreement, the approval is indicated by a common seal. A common seal is an engraved seal with the company name written on it. The next characteristic of a joint stock company is that of transferability of shares. What does that mean? The shares of a joint stock company is transferable without consulting with other shareholders. So, in a joint stock company, the shares of a company can be transferred by its members whenever, like we said, that it is a voluntary association. So, if a member want to dispose of the shares, they can do so, and they don't have to take consent of the other members, and they can do it by following the procedure that is devised for that certain purpose. So like the capital, we said, we divide the capital into small parts which are called shares. These shares are transferable. In case if a company is public company, the right of transfer is absolute. In case if a company is a private company, some restriction is there on the transfer of shares, because such restriction is imposed by the articles. The next characteristic of a joint stock company is perpetual existence. So, what is that? A company once formed continues to exist as long as it is fulfilling all the conditions prescribed by the law. Its existence is not affected by the death, insolvency, or retirement of its members. Perpetual existence means that a company has permanent existence. Unlike in sole proprietorship and partnership, if the owner gets if the owner dies, or if there is a dispute among the partners, this could end up the business. But in case of a joint stock company, it has a permanent existence. The shareholders, they may come or they may go, but the company will will continue doing its business forever. So the continuity of the company is not affected by the death of any member, by the by insolvency of any of the shareholder. The company can only be wound up only by the operation of law. The share of the company may change hands a number of times, but the continuity of the company is not affected at all. We will compare this form of business again with sole proprietorship and partnership, which do not enjoy uninterrupted life. The proprietor business almost comes to end if anything happens to the owner. Even when it is passed on to the successor, they may not be competent enough to operate it the way the owner operates it. Partnerships, for instance, it comes to an end on the death of or on the insolvency of a partner. A partner himself can also put an end to the partnership by retirement. So, unlike sole proprietorship and partnership form of business, joint stock company has a longer life. The next characteristic is separation of ownership and management. The shareholders, who are the owner, do not take active part in the everyday affairs of the company. Instead, they elect their representative, known as directors. The shareholders are widely scattered, they are not confined to a single place. So, shareholders may like to invest money, but they may not be interested to take part it's in management. The companies are managed by the board of directors. The ownership and the management are in separate hands. The shareholders do not get any right to participate in company management. So the right to manage the company affair is vested in the directors, who are actually they are elected by the shareholders. So the board of directors are working on the behalf of the shareholders. This is the reference book that I use for today's lecture. You can go through this and understand the topic by going through this book. Thank you for today.